Caribbean Fashion Week. We have a great talk today and some great guests. Our talk today is more than a hashtag, our brands, how we all can put our brands toward Black Lives Matters. Hi, everyone. Hi, Joelle. Joelle is joining us today. Joelle's from the brand I Am Kreyol. Marie's already is joining us too, and she is from the brand Kadokele, right? Asia's with us. She's going to be moderating this talk. And I'm ready, Asia, whenever you are.
Great. So I guess the first question, Joelle, have you ever felt or dealt with racism in general and as a Black fashion designer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, I run a women's high fashion brand, which is not really considered to be, usually when you think of high fashion, you don't think of Black designers. So I think one of the earliest memories of racism that I faced was when I first started in the industry, probably over 15 years ago. I started as an assistant to the fashion market editor at a magazine called Trace Magazine, which was like my favorite magazine at the time. Was living in New York, doing really well, working with the fashion market editor. And so after about 6 months, I was doing a back and forth thing, going to New York, living in New York during the week, coming home to Boston during the weekend. So like a lot of sacrifices, learned a lot, but just also output a lot, right? And was excelling, like I wasn't in New York partying, I was actually really grinding and learning the trade. So my boss, after 6 months, was getting ready to leave and wanted to promote me. Right. So she calls, I'm at home in Boston, and she's like, Joe, you've been doing an awesome job, so like I'm connecting with all of these networks, doing the work. And she offers me the position, she offers me the position as the assistant market editor. This is on a weekend. I go back to work the next week. Right. And no one's talking about it. Right. So I've been offered the position. No one's talking about it. I'm like, I bring it up to the editor, not my boss, but her boss. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of getting the runaround, right? As it turns out, so her boss, who is, the chief editor, a white woman, French woman, also had someone in mind who was, a white male, not doing as much work as I am, showing up like once every 2 weeks, a white, male who was very, I want to say he was very outgoing, all about the parties. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of showed me that there's more to it, right? There's more to it than just hard work, right? It is really about who you know. There was it was definitely racism, and it was a brand that was actually run by a black editor, but it was definitely racism because the boss herself, she had a lot of pull, a lot of connections. And to her, I had assisted her on certain shoots. To her, she really didn't think of me as being knowledgeable, or, being someone who could really excel, which was interesting because the magazine ended up folding. And she
should have taken you.
And she connected with me later on, which was very interesting. But that was my first real experience that, kind of understanding that, what your parents tell you that, you're Black, right? And so there's a different set of standards, and there's a different way that you show up, which is very sad, it's very sad that you have to do more of the work. But then what I also learned from that experience is that I didn't want to be put in the position where I was at the mercy of someone else, that I really wanted to create my own tables, and create my own outlets instead of trying to fit within somebody else's. So although I have faced racism along the way, it has definitely helped me shape my brand, because my brand, if you guys go back, like when I first started years ago, before anybody was doing high fashion with Black women, all I've ever used are Black women. And because that was very important to me, because I would see these elaborate, great sets, like all of, that all this money poured into like these very theatrical sets. but it'll always be white girls.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see, and I'm all about the theatrics. I'm all about the presentation in the story. So I wanted to see us in that light, really being creative. Right at the time, it was FUBU and Rockaware, and streetwear is great, but high fashion is my thing. So it definitely helped me shape the way that I created my brand overall. Yeah.
Do you want to answer that question too?
Yes, I think I've dealt with racism in both aspects, both in general and also as a Black designer. I'll start with the general part. And in general, as a woman of color and a Caribbean woman, there's so many strikes with that. And personally, at work, I've been overlooked for permanent roles because they didn't think I presented well. Which I have no idea what that means.
Sometimes you don't understand what that means.
You don't understand what that means. And I think part of what Joelle was saying earlier, it's about you think your work speaks for itself because I pride myself on a hard work ethics, but there's more to it. You have to also play to them. You have to play the game and speak their language. You have to talk like them. And that's just not gonna happen. First of all, I'm not born and raised here. It will never happen, even if I try. It will definitely come off as forced because it won't be natural. And as a designer, I started Kadokele back in 2012, the fall of 2012. And I started making t-shirts. And to preserve my uncle's legacy, that was the painter in our family. And from t-shirts, it grown into being handcrafted jewelry that I'm very well known for these days. But when I first started doing expos and I would do pop-up shops, I will have, white people come up to me and say, they will pay you a compliment, but also telling you, have you experiment with certain other materials instead of appreciating the beauty at hand. Now that I look back, it is a form of racism. It's telling me that what I'm using is not good enough. There's a big difference between telling you about a material, or I don't even know if there's a big difference, really, to be honest. But it's just really disrespectful and disappointing that here you are putting your brand out there and trying to make a name for yourself and want to speak about it and take pride in the work that you put in. Handcrafted jewelry is a labor of love. It takes time.
Yeah.
And for someone to completely disregard what you're presenting to them, for them to come up to you and say, have you explored this type of material that can do X, Y, and Z? I think it's just a different connotation. And it took me I've learned along the way to even speak up and talk more about my brand. And I've created sort of postcards that talks about the brand, the materials that I use, and why that I specifically use certain materials, has a teachable conversation instead of waiting for them to put on me what they want to say. Instead, I've take control of the conversation and start the dialogue that way instead. Have them learn more about me before they tell me about what I should do.
That's awesome. Thank you both for sharing those experiences. The next question is, do you think that the fashion industry is complicit in perpetuating racism? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I mean, it is widely known that Black talents have not had an equitable share in the fashion industry, right? They have not made it intentional to hire Black talents at the head of the fashion council or business of fashion to sort of have that balance, because we do bring a different energy. We bring a different point of view, and that's what's going to create the balance. I'm not so sure that it addressed the issue at the root cause by just, making it a trend. Let's promote this Black fashion designer or accessory designer as a flavor of the month, as a spotlight of the week. I just think that it needs to be at the root. You can't address systematic racism in any industry, since we're speaking about fashion, that you have to go at the root. And I think it starts at the Council of Fashion. It starts at the board of business to really speak and look at the table and see who's there to bring that diversity so we can have a balanced dialogue.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I was actually reading about the CFDA, and I think it's an invite-only sort of organization. And out of the 500 members within the organization, only about 4% of within the membership are Black. And I was like, wow. And then like only a small percent of Black designers presented at New York Fashion Week. So I'm thinking like, that's really small numbers. I mean, I think that there are so many other Black creatives and designers that should be able to partake in these opportunities, but it's just crazy to think about 4%. Like, that's like nothing. What about you, Joelle? What do you think?
Well, I think you guys both hit it on the nail. You know, it boils down to leadership. To think about it, you know, to think about 2020, and we're still talking about 4% CFDA, 15% of the models on the catwalk are Black. You know, it's like, are you kidding me? You know, so it's really insane. I remember having this conversation with Boston Magazine, actually, where, you know, the person who was interviewing me, I was asking her, I brought up your name, Marie. I said to her, I said, do you know Kadokele? Do you know, Velour Designs? You know, like, do you know these designers that are in Boston, right? Because your job is to essentially find these up and coming talents, to find these designers, right? So why is it that we are constantly seeing the same people in the magazines? Why are we not? Because I have all of these friends who are super talented and who are doing it, right? But they're not being showcased. They're not at the forefront. They're not known for what they do, you know? So there's still this stigma. And Marie, you hit it, right? Because whenever something like happens, whenever there's a George Floyd, whenever Black Lives Matter is, you know, in the media, where there's protests, everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, right? Like the flavor of the month.
Yeah.
You know? So, but it's really, honestly, it's like, how do we really make some systemic change? You know, like, in my other hat is that I work with entrepreneurs, you know, and so one of the major things for me right now is to make sure that we're working with the city of Boston to ensure that the contracts that are being put out throughout the city are also being, that people of color, Black and brown, Indigenous people, are being thought of for these contracts, because we're looking at like less than 1%, which is absolutely unacceptable for 2020.
And I agree completely. I think that, you know, especially kind of how you mentioned George Floyd and all of that stuff, how do you think brands should tackle racial justice and wanting to participate in the Black Lives Matter movement, but don't want to come across as, you know, performative? Like, how do they strike that balance?
But I think it boils down to your own conviction, right? So I am a firm believer that you should never, ever try to present something that you are not innately, right? So my brand identity is me, right? So I've always been about social causes. I believe in utilizing your voice, your artistry, you know, to actually make a difference in the world. You know, so for me, if I've always been speaking about Black women, right? So a lot of, like, if you go back, a lot of my shows, I will do, it's a very, my aesthetic is very concrete, where it's Black women who are strong, who are bold. And a lot of times I've had things that are very subtle, like a mask, right? Like, I've been doing masks before the pandemic for quite some time, where what I'm illustrating is, regardless of if you try to silence us, regardless if you try to back us up into a corner, you know, we are still going to show up strong, bold, you know, and voice our opinions and really make a difference. You know, this past summer, I worked on a project, a video project by the poor. I was commissioned by the Poor People's Project for this voting, you know, this voting campaign for this election year, really thinking about social justice in a very different way. The artist was Russell Taylor, and and it's called Wake Up. And it's really speaking to us coming out of a slumber and seeing what's really happening and what we can really do about it. It was directed by Dominga Martin, and we were commissioned. And, you know, like a lot of people think you can't really use your art to make like a significant statement. But that video was such a statement. We were commissioned to just do a dress, right? And we did a dress and partnered with Wendy Moma Michelle of MetaMind Art. And she created 3 portraits of Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, and Martin Luther King's mother. And it's so powerful. The video itself is so powerful. So for me, I think it boils down to what you're really good at. Stick to what you do. Don't try to go outside of the box and be like, okay, I'm going to be a speaker today. I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like, stick to what you do. If you're a dancer, if you're a singer, if you're an artist, you know, if you make jewelry, like, how can you make a statement with your own artistry?
Marie, if you want to give us one last final comment, we are running on time.
I agree with Joelle, and this is a internal dialogue that I have with myself all the time. And how do you impact change, and how do you do that? And it starts with you, because you are the brand. And it took me a while to actually understand that I am one with the brand. I thought that my work will speak for itself and I'll just stay behind the scene. But you have to stick with what you're good at. And since the beginning of my brand and to now, I'm really intentional about the content that I create on my platform, and what do I say to people, because I see the platform as an uplifting platform, as a way to bring people together, but also to make people see beauty where they most likely would not see beauty, or where beauty is ignored. And I think that's also a dialogue in itself. I've showcased, you know, Black women in my imagery in a way that to show that our voice matter. We have a lot to offer, and we are enough. And I think that's the problem that we also have too, is that we always think we need to do more because we're not enough. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think in my imagery, and I try to show that not only our beauty, our strength, mm-hmm. but also that we are enough. And I like to show a good stare, that I'll put a picture where the model, the Black woman, is looking straight at you. So you can mm-hmm. see in their eyes that, you know, they strength, beauty, purpose. And that's what I try to showcase to my brand. And that's the dialogue that I want to continue to have. And it's important to, Joelle does it very well too. And she's one of the person that inspires me a lot. And that dress she was talking about, I think it was red, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
beautiful.
It was beautiful, beautiful. It's such a powerful statement, but she's making it through her artistry. You don't have to change anything about yourself. You can still use who you are to make a powerful statement.
Yeah. Good. We could do this for so long with this conversation. It was such a powerful conversation. I want to first thank Asia for this topic. I think this topic was perfect in the times that we are in now. Joel, thank you so much for being with us. Marie, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you everyone for joining us at Boston Caribbean Fashion Week. And thank you again.